Recently, I have spoken about Chinese state interference in this country and why I think it's a pressing issue. The Eye has reported a story case which I think really reiterates this. So I'm going to read it out. Bear with me, it's not excessively long, but as always, I think it is important to read the whole thing out for the full context. This is from the 1st of April, and the report is by Poppy Wood. The University of York has been accused of censorship after it cut its live stream of a graduation ceremony when a Chinese student held up a flag in support of pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. Kyle Ma, 27, from Shandong, graduated with an MA in Social Justice and Education from the University of York in February. During this graduation ceremony, the student held up the flag saying "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times" in traditional Chinese script, a slogan used by pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. Video footage of the University of York's official livestream of the ceremony cut off when Mr. Ma held up the flag and was replaced for 10 seconds with the university's logo. I have seen correspondence between Mr. Ma and Charlie Jeffery, the University of York's Vice-Chancellor, in which the student notified the university of his intention to protest peacefully in line with university protocol. An official responding on behalf of Mr. Jeffery declined Mr. Ma's invitation to hold up the flag with him, but no steps were taken to prevent the student from doing so alone. A University of York registrar told Mr. Ma that whilst we can join together in expressing horror at human right violations, I'm sure you will appreciate that flags and their associated symbolism can elicit very different deep reactions which could undermine this institutional position of mutual respect. To Ian Duncan Smith, the former Tory leader and one of a number of MPs sanctioned by China for criticising President Xi Jinping's regime, claimed it showed the University of York was in hoc to Beijing. The University of York hosts around 3,000 Chinese students, accounting for 56% of its total international student numbers. Mr. Ma said the majority of his peers on the Social Justice and Education Masters were Chinese nationals, and that he thought this was likely to have played a huge role in the university's actions. A spokesman for the University of York said it is protocol to change camera angles during live broadcasts if there is potential disruption on stage. The government appeared to acknowledge that the incident could amount to overseas interference and said it was reviewing its protections for UK universities. Mr. Jeffery welcomed the Chinese ambassador to the UK, Zhang Ziguang, last year, who told Chinese students to keep in mind General Secretary Xi Jinping's ardent teachings, adhere to patriotism and serving the country. The university, this is York, had previously been accused of failing to uphold pro-democracy campaigners' free speech after students from Hong Kong were ordered to take down a Freshers' Fair display in 2019 after Chinese students complained. So firstly, the first thing that I find striking is the student involved wasn't a Hong Konger. He was actually from the mainland. So I would say a very brave young man because, um, you know, he could be taking risks of his family being harassed back home or he being harassed back home when he returns to China. He could also get harassment from fellow students. Chinese national students have engaged in violent threats towards their peers. I know this for a fact because I've spoken to Hong Kong students who have been affected by this. So very brave young man to take this position. I absolutely salute Kyle Ma. Quite a contrast to the gutlessness of Mr. Jeffery, and I'm calling it as I see it. Um, Firstly, I don't think there is any mandatory protocol to invite the ambassador there. Yes, the Chinese students make up large numbers, but there's other nationalities there as well. Are they going to invite ambassadors from every country represented? Maybe they are. I doubt it. As for the procedure, that they cut this off due to disruption. Um, if there was a group of Chinese students holding up the Chinese flag, would they cut that off? Highly unlikely. Well, the Chinese flag is the national flag of China. Why should that be permitted, but a protest flag shouldn't? Um, to a victim of the Uyghur genocide, cultural genocide, they would find the Chinese flag offensive. So that line about flags being hugely symbolic. It's sort of contradictory. Um, I'm just disgusted with our universities. I do think they are showing moral cowardice, and they might argue that they're doing everything legally mandated, so they're within the laws of this country. But I don't think that's enough. I think they need to prove that they're not serving Beijing by proxy by going out of their way to pander to the Chinese embassy. Um, I'm really disgusted. I think Ian Duncan Smith is absolutely right on this issue. Like I say, in the past I've criticised IDS for his welfare positions, and I still do. But when it comes to China, he's absolutely right. Um, it's just so glaringly obvious that Beijing sees this as a soft power strategy by interfering in our universities. I mean, the fact that Chen Ziguang told students to uphold Xi Jinping's um, teachings, adhere to patriotism and serving the country. He is basically inciting Chinese students to be nationalistic whilst they are in another country, in a host nation. That is, to me, directly inciting them to bully their peers. Now, of course, he's not stupid. He's not going to say that. He's not going to say you need to harass our critics. But it's basically inciting that because it's encouraging nationalism. I think that is crossing a line. Um, and, you know, York isn't the only guilty institution. Birmingham's been involved. There's been other institutions, some more so than others, probably the ones that have more Chinese students. But there's also the thing about Chinese students, there is definitely a nationalism there. I've seen it. But there's also, you know, I've been critical of them, but there's also an argument in their favour that whilst they are in the West, they should be able to think freely in a way that they cannot do in China. So, you know, Chinese students will often say, oh, we're not the CCP, we're not communists. Okay, well, what I would say to them is prove it, speak out. And if you're not speaking out, what are you scared of? Are you scared of reprisals back home? In which case you have to acknowledge it is a dictatorship. Or are you scared of, stigma from your fellow compatriots, from other Chinese students? That's a message I would ask them. I'm currently working with Chinese students. One of my students is doing her ELTS for the UK, which is a speaking test. Another one is already in the UK, and she just needs to improve her English. She's a bit older. I think she's thinking about taking a citizenship test now. If any of these issues ever come up, I'm going to speak very candidly to them. I'm not going to bring it up. Because it doesn't directly correspond to the sort of things I'm working with them on. But one thing I'm proud of, I have never, ever, in all my work with Chinese students, when I was over there, I never, ever once sold out. I never, praised the CCP or pandered to Chinese nationalism just to please people. Never. I'm proud of that because there would have been times it would have been the easier thing to do. Now, I'm not saying I'm super brave and I went in like as some, big CCP critic and I was very vocal. Obviously, I didn't do that either. So I'm not making myself out to be brave. There's many people out there who are a lot braver than me, but this is the least I can do. Um, I'm just disgusted by the weakness of our universities. It's pretty damn obvious that they are indeed pandering to Beijing. Uh, Whether it's from fear or whether it's to get investment, I don't know. It's maybe a bit of both, but it's a disgrace because it's just common sense. If they're investing heavily with joint institutions in China or from the Chinese embassy, it makes sense that they wouldn't want to offend their, I was going to say paymasters, but I don't want to get into libel territory. Um, but yeah, it is damn obvious that they are pandering to Beijing, and that is a disgrace. Um, these vice chancellors, they are, they're overpaid in my opinion, but that's beside the point. They are in a position of influence. They're in a position where they're hobnobbing with ambassadors and so on. They can make these decisions, and I think they're making the wrong decisions. I think a lot of them are frankly cards. Morally speaking, I think they are cards, because I think they are putting the sensitivities of a foreign dictatorship before British values on freedom of expression. That is a disgrace. Um, and it makes me angry. Makes me very angry. I think the government, the government says they are doing more to rein in on this, but it's a little bit like criminal justice. Um, Universities will turn around and say, "Oh, what about our academic freedom?" Well, what the government can do is threaten to cut off funding to some of these departments. That's what I would do if I was the education secretary. I would threaten to cut off funding unless they prove that they are defending the rights of dissidents and not going out of their way to pander to Beijing. I think this could be borderline treason. If we have another major security breach in this country, and you have academics, vice chancellors, namely, I'm talking about senior academics, who are basically going out of their way to pander to Beijing, to me, that's a thin line. It really is. And if you get joint research where the Chinese side has ties to the PLA, questions need to be asked. So I don't think it's good enough for them to say, "Oh well, we're within the law." They may technically be within the law, but they need to, you know, the irony is, the Chinese ambassadors talking about inciting patriotism among Chinese students. The notion of patriotism would be terrifying to British academics. No, that would be non-woke. That would be, it really pisses me off. The weakness of these people, the naivety. And it's worse, actually. I don't think it is naivety. I think they're clever people. I think it's actually collaboration with the Chinese regime. You could be damn sure that every single Chinese company, institution, public body has ties to the CCP because they have to. So it's impossible to say, "Oh, we're just having this joint educational partnership with a Chinese university and it has no political connections." That is astonishingly naive, because every Chinese company, every Chinese institution has political ties. Every single one of them, because they have to. It's the way China is set up. The CCP has its fingers on absolutely everything. That's why when Chinese businesses say they have no CCP ties, it's either a willful lie or they themselves are being naive, and I don't think it's the latter, because they have to answer to Beijing. Constitutionally, they have to answer to the CCP in the Chinese constitution. So, honestly, I'm just disgusted by what our universities are doing, this pandering. I would like to see limits, frankly, on the number of Chinese students coming in. I think there's too many. Why not students from other countries? This is actually positive discrimination, because what about students from other countries? Shouldn't they be given opportunities as well to come to British universities? Um, why is it there's so many Chinese students coming here compared to other Western countries? I mean, could it be that other Western countries have cracked down on Confucius institutes? I am not saying, and I've made this point before, I would not block Chinese students coming here at all. That would be discrimination. But I do question why. I mean, the figure here is 56% of all international students at the University of York are Chinese. So that makes me think they are disproportionately pandering to one country over others. Why? Why? Is it because China is the world's second biggest economy and they want Chinese money and investment at the price of British values, at the price of freedom of conscience? That is something I have a big problem with. And even if it wasn't a freedom of conscience issue, just the vile nature of the Chinese regime should make it morally questionable. I also think those Chinese students who do want to be very nationalistic, again, they should be reminded that they are guests in this country and they should behave accordingly. If they're threatening fellow students, I want to see our university taking action, suspending them, as it would with any other student. It is glaringly obvious that our universities are pandering to Chinese sensitivities, whether it be from the embassy, the ambassador, or some Chinese students themselves, nationalistic students. They should be not able to dictate that if they don't like what fellow students are saying about the CCP, then the university just takes that down like they've done with the stand. The university should respond, you can have your opinion, but they're allowed their opinion as well, as long as they're being peaceful about it. It's very disturbing that universities will cave in to the demands of nationalistic students. What they should do is remind them that this is a democracy and there's a plurality of opinions allowed, plus taking action against any threats. I'm really disgusted. I'm not surprised, but I'm disgusted. And the University of York is not the only guilty party, but it's a good uh, case example, I should say.